Somebody lost in those emails. I didn't see what they were even doing.
I mean, I don't think it.
Okay, all right. This is the Wetland County Board of Commissioners meeting. It's September 22nd at 1:15 p.m. Roll call, please.
Jim Marlowe.
Present.
Britt Gentry.
President.
Tim Atkinson.
Present, thank you, Jerry.
Kind of going out of order here, but I want to go ahead since we started talking about this Baxter development assignment, assumption, and indemnity agreement. Andrew, I want to turn this over to you. Let you talk about this. I've been forwarding all the emails to everybody.
This is a quite confusing one. I'm not sure I'm keeping up with the emails.
Sure. So I will try to be brief, but also clear. There was some confusion maybe last Wednesday about what this document actually did. And this type of document is one, and I sent an email out. I don't know if it got to everybody or not, but just to reiterate it, this type of document is something that's done in most large-scale projects. Essentially, you have an agreement between two parties where one party says, we're going to do A, B, and C. They don't really have the ability to do A, B, and C, and so they contract with somebody who does that to do A, B, and C. In this particular case, you have Walker's Bluff, and there's elite casinos, right? They're going to try to build this casino. Walker's Bluff isn't necessarily in the business of doing that. So they sign an agreement with Baxter Development, and this is a crude explanation just to try to help provide some clarity. There are obviously more details. This particular document, what it does is it takes the rights, responsibilities, and duties that Walker's Bluff has under the host community agreement, and it transfers some of those to Baxter Development to complete the project or to actually do the project. These are fairly standard agreements. We did have a problem with this particular agreement. By the way, the reason Williamson County has to sign this is because we were a party to the host community agreement. Signing this document doesn't take away any rights that the county has. It doesn't obligate us to do anything. We just have to give our consent for Walker's Bluff to be able to transfer some of their responsibility to Baxter Development. The particular issue we had with this document was the dates. At the very beginning, it was a 4-page document that you had. The first page was a cover sheet. The second page at the top, it was dated. And it was dated, the typeset was 2020, but then somebody had written over it with a blue pen and put a 1 to make it 2021. If you then look at the fourth page under the signatures, the people who had already executed the document signed it last year in 2020. That's a problem for obvious reasons, right? If we create a contract today, you can sign it today, or you can sign it tomorrow, or you can sign it next year. You can't sign it yesterday. And so it just gave the appearance that something was signed before it was created. We then reached out to Baxter Development and said, look, we'd like a clean copy. I also was in touch, had a conversation with our gaming attorney, Sid, and we asked this very question of, one, should the county sign this? And two, are there problems with the document? He agreed that there were problems with the dates of the document and it needed to be cleaned up. He also agreed that we should sign this document. There's nothing in here that harms us. We're not alleviating any of our rights, or we're not obligated to anything. At the end of the day, under the host community agreement, if Walker's Bluff or Baxter Development doesn't perform, that's an issue between them. There's no legal ramification negative against the county. So my recommendation, my understanding is that Chairman Marlowe has said that there will be a board vote to decide, to sign it. The state's attorney's office advice, and that would be Brandon's and mine, we've both independently and collectively talked about this issue, is that you should execute this agreement. My understanding is late yesterday, hopefully everybody has gotten a copy of it. Late yesterday, Baxter Development did send over a cleaned up copy that I did have an opportunity to review yesterday evening while I was at home. And I sent back an email saying that the new document, the clean version, if you will, is perfectly acceptable. I'm happy, hopefully that gave a nice overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about this agreement.
Did the dates change of signatures or still look the same?
Signature,
20 and 21.
correct. Their signatures are still the same. However, it looks like there was an error, just a typographical secretarial error on the first page, making it 2021. The document was created in 2020. It was signed by the parties, as you see there on page 4, back in 2020. However, the county had no obligation to sign this document at that time until the board, the Illinois Gaming Board, the state essentially, has come through and given a preliminary approval. While we're on this topic, I guess I think everybody understands there was some confusion that maybe the Gaming Board on September 9th had issued a full license to Walker's Bluff. That is incorrect. That was also in the news media that they'd been given a full license. Again, that information is incorrect. They were given what in kind of slang or layman's terms is known as a preliminary license. The project was given a sustainability rating, essentially, which allows Walker's Bluff to basically get started. It allows them to start moving forward. They can start, doing layouts, different plans, looking at their security, ordering cameras, ordering gaming machines, making up tables, deciding what games are going to go in the casino, things of that nature. They cannot, and they can do a lot with what they have now. This was a big step, but let's be clear, it was not full licensure. It is a step on the road to full license being granted, and I think that's the anticipation of everybody involved. But at this point, even if they had the casino built right now, unless the status of the license changes, they couldn't open their doors, if that makes sense. So I'm happy to answer any questions I can on that. I have limited knowledge on that. Sid would have more knowledge there. Again, I've been in contact with him. The conversation we had was short. It was less than 10 minutes, but it was a very informative, nuts and bolts conversation that I think kind of brought everything together, at least for me and for my office.
So my question is, without a budget, they can't really turn dirt until there is a budget bargain between two people in good faith. That has to be done.
Sure. There is, and what I'm saying is hearsay, it's things I've heard from a third party, but you have some people who believe that the version of good faith that they put forth was signing the host community agreement. In my personal opinion, that's a bunch of hogwash. The HCA is pretty clear on that point, I believe, and I believe Sid mentioned this in the conversation. It was a conference call. Chairman Marlowe was on this call also. And so you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I misheard Sid, but they have to bring the budget to us.
That's right.
There has been an agreement, but it's only been verbal. There may be an email to this effect too, that they would bring the budget to us, and I think Tony has reiterated that multiple times. But here we are, and a budget still hasn't been brought in front of this board, and that is frustrating. And it's my understanding is there's an agreement in place that not a shovelful of dirt will be turned until we are presented the budget. I think they're scheduled, my understanding is for October 6th to start that. I could have that date wrong, but so, I mean, that's coming up. This is a short timeline. My recommendation would be to try to put some pressure on them to get them in here and present you guys with that budget.
Now, on that, you're exactly correct on the conference call that we had and everything with Sid. The dirt that they're turning, though, I'm not clear on whether it be they're referring to the casino or the road.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the casino, we have nothing to do with building the casino.
Correct.
And we have everything to do with building the road for connecting the Reed Station extension.
Right.
Okay, that is where we have not been presented a budget on. Right. So now, if they're going to, as you explained, and this is what I conveyed to Sid and to the board, that Tony told me October 6th they're going to be burning diesel. That could be the casino.
Sure.
The road, we have not been presented with a budget, and that was my assumption when we signed the HCA originally, that was our fallback default to was there would have to be a budget that we would have to agree to. And in that HCA, we both are required to work toward approving the budget.
The budget.
We cannot walk back away from it. We have to continue to work toward approving the budget.
And to further this, everybody probably knows this, but just in case they don't, I'll say this. Kim Meyer, who was the auditor and who was on the casino subcommittee, for lack of a better thing to call it, my understanding is she has reached out on more than one occasion to try to get some preliminary information about a budget, to get them to send over some information she needs. There's also some other information, and I forget the name of it off the top of my head, I'm sorry, that she's requested, and they haven't gotten back to her, as at least the last update that I got. So again, I don't know who puts the pressure on or who does it, or if there's a phone call, or if Sid needs to make a call or what, but that's information that, again, the understanding was when we signed the host community agreement that we would negotiate the budget in good faith. That obviously process hasn't happened. We've reached out to them through multiple outlets saying we need this information, and they haven't responded. They may have said on a phone conversation, yeah, we'll get it to you, but there's no evidence of that. And yes, you're spot on. On that October 6th date, we don't know what that starts.
Yeah.
Is that starting the road? If it is, we have a problem.
Got a problem.
If it's starting the casino, and we don't have a problem, but they do have a 24-month period to complete, for total completion is my understanding. I don't know this off the top of my head. Does that include the road having to be completed within the 24 months?
24 months to complete the casino.
Just the
Yeah,
casino?
just the casino.
Okay.
Now, I will take you back to day one. The day one, the conversation was they're gonna do the road, get the road built, and then go into the casino operation of building it.
Yes.
Now, that could have changed. Now, I'm not meant privy to these conversations, but it could have changed. Something's changed.
It may have changed on their end, but it's not changed here with this board. Now,
I was looking at the plan.
last September, we had a meeting and Tony zoomed in, and I asked him that question. I said, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but not one shovelful of dirt will be turned until we have the budget approved. He goes, that is correct. We're on record. That's an open meeting, and we had it on record.
So it would be important, I guess, from our standpoint, to find out what they're doing on October 6th.
I think he was invited to this today, wasn't he?
Yes, I did reach out to him. I said, the board requests your presence here at this meeting, but he never gave any indication that he would be here at all. And actually, in the last conversation, to clarify, I did tell him we would put it on the agenda for next Wednesday. I see we must have had it on the agenda before, or we had it on the agenda. Maybe I told you to go ahead and put it on the agenda, but it's on the agenda now. So to vote on. And so let me bring this back to you. This is going to take a board vote. This is not just me. So I want the board to vote on this. About
Moving back to this assumption of assignment.
the assumption.
But you had an issue with something in Florida?
Well, no, Andrew, you already answered my question, right? I mean, it's not the cleanest document out there, but since your legal advice is it has no effect on us, if they need it, then we should be agreeable to it.
And that advice is consistent with Sid's advice as well.
Right.
So you have Brandon, Sid, and myself all
Sid has
basically
the
telling you the
document
same
as well.
thing.
I mean, I never like to see signatures in your part.
It's just-
Sure.
But, you know, hey,
You know, hey, it's their signature, it's their mess, so.
I've always said I go by attorney's advice. I'm not an attorney, so I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to have the chairman sign the Baxter Development LLC WBCR assignment, assumption, and indemnity agreement. Say that again.
Yeah, I second.
It's a mouthful. 3 times fast.
We don't need to-
Second one, I just said.
I'm not gonna say it, so.
Jim Marlowe.
Yes.
Brent Gentry.
Yeah.
Tim Atkinson.
Yeah,
The county grant administration process. This is a grant process that Celeste brought to me and brought to my attention. This is for the Saline River, I believe it's called Saline River LLC, development for the meat processing facility off of 166. This is a grant application for $1 million. There was a little confusion. All I wanted to say was, now that Celeste is no longer an employee of the county, I just wanted to make sure that everything was in order. That was the hesitation on this. I wanted to run everything by our state's attorney's office. We conferred yesterday at a meeting. There was Ashley, Brandon, Andrew, and myself conferring on this. And from my understanding, Andrew, we've got the green light to go ahead and sign this
Okay,
application.
before we do that, I had a conversation with one of the people involved in this from down there. And I would like to table this just for 1 week until next Wednesday. It's my impression now that they don't need us to sign this. I just found that out at lunchtime today.
He has to sign what, Jim?
This grant agreement. Have you heard, have you,
Nope,
today, have
I've
you
not
heard
been
anything?
contacted.
Yeah, I've had, I was kind
So,
of, I've had 2 calls from people involved in this thing, and I know a meeting last week didn't go very well. I would like to hear what really is going on, because I know Celeste was not happy. I know she had a 60-day window, that she can't do any work. She's not doing work for the county. She's not getting paid by the county. Her 60 days are long gone. From what I understood, there was a meeting with Jim and Ashley and Kim and Celeste was not happy, rightfully so, based on things I've heard it said. So what the HELL, I guess, is going on with all this mess? And
Well, let me start off with that, and then Andrew, you can answer his question.
Sure.
Ashley came to me and, well, first off, I has to go back with, we had a hearing, a public hearing on August the 13th, I believe it is.
mid-August, yeah.
And as Celeste would have me do, the chairman usually sits in, we have a public hearing on any grant application. We had that in August 13th. And then I've been talking with Stephanie. Stephanie made reference that Celeste dropped off some papers for me to sign on this grant. She told me that she had, I don't know what she did at the time, had times had gone up to do work in her office. And so she would get the keys from Stephanie to go up to get her, do whatever in her office, and return the keys to Stephanie. My question was, if Celeste is gone, why is she getting back into her office? It's no longer her office. That was the first question. The second question came up with Ashley. Ashley was confused as to where the documents are. The agreement that she wanted me to sign had bullet point 40 on it. Ashley's asked, where are the other documents? And I said the same thing, where are the other documents at? Kim Meyer brought up the point that if we sign this with Celeste, then that becomes an issue with the audit. And the reason for that is because we as a board voted at the time Celeste left to utilize Greater Egypt as our grant administrator. We run grants through Greater Egypt. So that's what she said. Now she goes, so your internal controls reflect that we are going to use Greater Egypt. If we do this, that means that the board is not using the internal controls that we had directed. And so that doesn't qualify, or that throws up a red flag on the audit. So Ashley and I thought, well, let's call Celeste in and we'll just ask her, we're just wanting to inquire who's doing what, when, where, how, everything. Just, we want to know what the relationship is. And so she came in. Ashley was in my office. I had Kim Meyer on the phone, and we discussed. Kim presented the audit concerns, and the solution to that would be that was discovered was, and maybe we talked about at a later time would be, as a board, let's also make a policy that we could contract with any private individual as well. So now we could either use Greater Egypt or we could go with a private individual, but that would take the board action like what we did with Greater Egypt. But we haven't done that yet. Celeste left the room. She was a little upset. I then received a phone call from one of the investors. He was a little upset, and I said I would be looking for options. So since that time, I've been working with Andrew and Brandon on this to find out what our options are. Andrew, I don't have it in front of me, but we were forwarded a copy of the requirements from DCEO. And in there, they had a couple things listed that we have to follow as, what are we, the grantee or the grantor?
Williamson County is the grantee.
Grantee.
Mhm.
Okay. One of the stipulations that we found out, now these are the standards set by DCEO, is that when an employee leaves, there is a 1-year period that they can't do any work as a consultant, basically, or correct me, I know I'm not saying it right, but Andrew, on how do they list it? Item D on that.
Item D, you
standard,
talk about a covered person.
right, a covered person. A covered person would have been an employee of where they work.
Sure.
And in that case, it had been Williamson County. Celeste could process DCEO grants from the city of Marion or any other entity because she wasn't an employee of the city of Marion or any other entity. But as far as the county goes and the way those standards went, it looked like she had to wait at least 1 year before running any grants through the county, and which is what she was doing. She's using our FEIN number to run this grant through the counties. So now, granted, she started on this project before she left. So that was one of the questions that we had. So what we did was I arranged this meeting with Andrew and Brandon and Ashley, and I had Kim Meyer on the phone, and we called Mr. Dave Govan, who's the program manager for DCEO. We had a very good phone call with him. I think we were, through his guidance, we were able to overcome a couple of things. So all I said to Andrew and Brandon, I said, you guys are good with everything here, then we're good. But right now, one of the options that we were looking at was if Celeste was become a private, her own contractor. And so in order to do that, she'd have to have her own FEIN number, which is no big deal. And she'd have to be bonded, because we just had a meeting the day earlier that, earlier in the day that Celeste came into my office with Tom Couch. And that meeting was to let people know within the county, if you contract with a private contractor, we need to have their insurance. We need a copy of their insurance and their work comp if they have it. There's a form that we're going to have them sign that basically is a hold harmless agreement to the county in case somebody gets hurt.
Plus minimum coverages.
Right, and there are certain coverages. And actually that had happened earlier, probably about a month earlier, where a gentleman slipped and broke his hip downstairs, who is a private contractor. So in this case, then now Celeste becomes a private contractor. So she would have to have her insurance that would be required, just like what we talked about, plus her own FEIN number. And so she's basically in business for herself now as a private contractor. Second part of that would be then the county board would have to establish a policy, an internal control policy stating, like I said, beside utilizing Greater Egypt, now we could go with any private contractor, including Celeste, if that's who the board chooses. So that's what we were working on. That's what the meeting was yesterday, talking with Mr. Govan to get clarification. I had told 2 of the investors of the group I was working on this to look for options. And at the time, Mr. Goldman wasn't available until Tuesday, until yesterday. He was out. He doesn't work Fridays or Mondays. And, so that's why we had to wait until Tuesday. And so that's where we're at today. As of today, Brandon and Andrew, they've talked and consulted. Everything seems to be in place. Oh, one part I left out. When Celeste brought the documents to me, she brought items, two items here. These 2 pages. And on this one page here, it has bullet point 40. So our question is, where's bullet point 1 through 39? If I'm going to put my name on here and sign it, let me read this to you. By signing this, basically it says, I'm aware that everything is correct, true, complete, and accurate to the best of my knowledge. I'm also aware that any false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements or claims may be subject to me, may subject me to criminal, civil, or administrative penalties. All right? Well, if I'm going to put my name on a document and I only have bullet point 40, where's bullet point 1 through 39? I'd like to see something before I put my name to it. When Celeste was an employee here, she would always just come down and hand these to me to sign. And as an employee, it wasn't a problem because we were covered by errors and omission within our own liability coverage. But now she's not an employee. So that's where the issue is. Another issue was that under the standards for procurement that are set by the DCEO, we're required to have all the documents. If the county is going to be, if the grant is going to be run through the county, we're required to have all the documents. So that's what Brandon asked one of the investors yesterday, I believe it was, and Brandon got all the documents, I believe, as of today, and Andrew and Brandon have looked over the documents. Everything's good to go, and so that's where we're at. And so I'm ready to sign it, and but if you think something's different, now that's where we're at. And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong on anything.
No, I don't think you're wrong on anything. I'll provide a little supplemental information, and then if anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those to the best of my ability. Specifically with the signing of this and the bullet points, that's just common practice. It would be the advice of the state's attorney's office and any attorney worth their salt that you guys should never sign a document without actually seeing or reading the entire document. You guys wouldn't sign a mortgage for your house without reading over the paperwork. You wouldn't buy a car without doing that. So why would you sign a $15 million grant without doing so? It seems silly. So just in general, yes, we wanted to get those documents. It took a little while to get them. We finally did get them from Celeste this morning, reviewed them. Typically, the state's attorney's office does not review grant applications. This is a little bit of a special circumstance, obviously. And from a technical or legal standpoint, there's not an issue. From an outside perspective or a layman's perspective, I had a couple issues with some of the documents. First, not all the documents were provided to us. We did have the bullet points, but she left out a lot of the maps and some of the financial details. We went back to her and said, look, we need all these because as the chairman mentioned, we have to keep a file of this. This was interesting. The first time that I was made aware of this, I was made aware, hey, there's an issue. Celeste has been coming in, using her office. We're just going to have a meeting with her to discuss what she's doing, why she's doing it. Hey, you're not an employee here. You really can't use our facilities and stuff like that. Sorry, but we have to do that. The next thing I heard is then about this grant application. There are questions whether she worked during the 60 days immediately following her retirement. That's not a question for the county. That's not a question we should be concerned with. That's an issue between her and IMRF. It is at least the standpoint that the state's attorney's office is taking. Specifically looking at this application, we have an issue. Section D that Jim told you about talks about covered persons, and specifically what we're looking at here is a conflict of interest. Okay, it says a covered person, and it defines a covered person. Essentially, anybody that has ties to the county, or is an employee, or is a subcontractor, anybody who's affiliated with us. They cannot financially benefit from a grant if there are no, if they quit, if they have inside information, you can't do that, right? It's a clear conflict. So the problem was, how do we, is that an issue? Can we get around that issue? And then you couple that with the fact of, on its face, it doesn't look like she can do this. And then the investors, at least what we were hearing at the beginning, have said, if Celeste doesn't do this, we have an agreement with her, a separate agreement, by the way. There's a contract out there between Celeste and Saline Rivers LLC, is that, or Silver, whatever it is, whatever the meat processing plant, whatever the company's name is. Anyway, if you don't let Celeste do it, we have some problems with Greater Egypt, blah, blah, blah. If you don't let Celeste do it, we're going to back out. We're going to move this operation to Kentucky. All right, there's another facility there. It's up and ready to go. We're threatening to go there. Whether that threat's a valid threat or not, who knows? And for the purpose of this discussion, it really doesn't matter whether it is or not a valid threat. So you had two issues here. The first issue is, can Celeste do it? Or does this Section D in the regulations prevent her from doing it since she has a conflict? Okay, that's kind of the first issue. And what we discussed with the project manager, or which was Dave Gobin yesterday, who, by the way, when this gets submitted, is going to be the monitor for this particular grant. So we're literally hearing it from the horse's mouth. Anybody can write a grant application. They don't have to be an employee of the county, and they don't have to be contracted with the benefiting business. Anybody at all can write this application, is what he said. So there's not a problem. She can write the application, we can sign it. The county is the grantee, right? The money comes from, the state or whatever. It comes to us, and then we send it to the benefiting business. No problem. And so based on that, I would think you can sign the application. So Brandon and I decided to go a little bit further. There are some arguments that we could make to a judge that Celeste is not a covered person. And if this was going to be in a court of law, both Brandon and I feel super confident that we could defend any decision made by this county board in front of a judge. The problem is, this isn't going to go before a judge. This isn't going to go into a court. This is going to go in front of a grant monitor who's going to just make a decision whether to fund or not fund, right? And if they do fund it, and then later they find out, hey, there were some issues with it, now there's a recapture potential where we have to then send the money back. So first issue, Celeste can do the application, not a problem. Then there's the second step, which is the grant administration, or what they now call essentially a delivery, is what we were told yesterday by Dave. And essentially, this is where the potential conflict would come in, is the administration fee, which on a grant of this size would be about $30,000. Can she get that? And the answer really comes down to, is the money being paid out of the grant using grant funds, or is it coming from another source? When Celeste was an employee here, she got paid a salary. So when she got the administration fee, that just went into the county coffers. It didn't go to her. So there was no issue because none of the grant money was being used to pay her to administer or deliver the grant. We had a separate agreement with her. She's an employee. She gets a salary. In fact, I think she was a contracted employee, right? 4-year contract or something like that. So that's not an issue. But the fact that now she isn't a contractor or she isn't employed with us, how is she getting paid? That's the question. How does she get the administrative fees? She does have a contract, which we're not privy to at this point, between her and this company, okay? And maybe it says that she'll get paid directly from them to administer the grant. I don't know. I doubt it. Otherwise, that would have been brought forward already. At the end of the day, though, this is a moot point if the grant gets denied, right? The question in front of this board is, do you sign that application or not? The advice from Brandon and myself after meeting with Mr. Gobin is, yes, you should sign this application. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly in order. Now, this grant application has been basically my life. I've ate it and slept it for basically, all week. It sounds like, though, that Tim says maybe there's some new information within the last 2 hours that we're not aware of. And so without knowing what that information is or having any conversations, that does give me a little bit of pause to advise you whether to execute the document now or not. So.
Well, I've got one other point.
Sure. I only had one other thing, and that is on the application itself. If you decide to sign it today or next week, don't sign the paper that Celeste gave you. The reason I say that is because on the updated full document with all 40 bullet points, this is a $15 million grant, a project. The grant is $1 million. The investors are putting up $1 million, and then there's about $12.9 million that's going to come from procurement bonds, okay? The document you have in front of you has the $1 million grant, and it has about $6 million in other funds. It doesn't list the full 15. There's a conflict here. One paper says one number, the paper you're signing says another number. I would want to get that straight and get, a fresh copy. My guess, and I don't know because I don't write grants, but my guess is that what you got was kind of a first draft. So I'd want to make sure we have the most up-to-date copy before you execute it. That's my only concern. And I say that with a grain of salt because I don't know what information Tim has that I'm not aware of yet. So
Two other points I want to make. One of the reasons why we wanted to wait till we spoke with Dave Gobin, well, number one, to make sure, I think it was a good idea to get everything, since he's a program manager, that'd be the answer guy. He'd be able to give us all the answers. But one of the questions was, if this grant was awarded, but then later on pulled for whatever the reason, or something wasn't right on the grant, would that have an effect on any other grant that we have in the county? How would this affect anything? How would it affect our standing with the DCEO? And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but Mr. Gobin indicated that it wouldn't affect anything.
that's correct. He indicated these are standalone grants.
Okay, but we needed to know that, and we couldn't get a hold of Mr. Gobin until Tuesday. The second thing is Mr. Gobin also stated that he asked how much money was the grant applying for. It's $1 million. He said, we've got the money. So, in other words, not that you want to drag your feet on this, but they had the money. It wasn't a time issue. So that's 2 points I wanted to make from that Dave Gobin brought up in yesterday's meeting. So,
Drew, of course, we all got calls, it just went from a little stick fire to a roaring, blazing fire that I'm not sure was really necessary, but who is paying Celeste? It's not the county, correct?
That's correct.
So the jobs of all these jobs coming in here, this big deal coming in here, we're trying to ruffle this up. So they're getting paid by this group?
Maybe.
Maybe.
And the reason I tell you maybe, we know definitely she's not being paid by the county. However, we know she has a contract between the company and her. I don't know if that contract is for some form of compensation or administrative fees or anything like that. There are people who become, after they leave, become like independent contractors or start their own business and do this. And the reason is because if you write, 3 or 4 of these a year and you take $30,000 from each one, obviously it could be a pretty lucrative independent, practice there. So that's why I say I can't give you an answer. I don't know how she's getting paid right now.
Okay. Second question, I'm just trying to play catch up here.
Sure.
This had potential. You have a CPA on the phone. Were you invited to this meeting?
The original meeting when
Any
Celeste went
meeting
into
to do with
Jim's office,
Celeste or any of this stuff? You're the legal counsel. Were you invited to the meeting?
I was invited to some of the meetings, yes.
The one with Celeste was in?
No, I was not invited to that.
See, that's just flat wrong. Okay, well, I think it's handled wrong. I think it's terrible. That's all I'll say. I think you should have been there. This should have never got to where it got to be today. I think a lot of fires expanded off of this that shouldn't have, and quite honestly, disappointing. And I think if stuff like this happens, you need to be in the room. You're the legal counsel. I mean, that's.
let me address that. The very
Please do,
first,
explain it.
the very first meeting was set up with Ashley and I decided we needed to bring Celeste in to find out what was going on. It was just an informational, that was all it was, informational. Once we got the information, then I reached out to Drew and Brandon, and along with Ashley and Kim. So everybody verified what happened in the meeting with Celeste. It was never an accusation, the meeting that we had with Celeste. It was simply, what's going on here? That's all it was. And that's all it was. She left, she was upset, I can't help that. I'm sorry that she felt upset. She was not attacked. It was never anything that required legal advice. It's first off, let's gather the information, what is she doing? And then Ashley and I then took it to Brandon and Drew, and from that point on, they've been included in everything.
No, that's
So-
fine, but we operate differently.
So
I always have the
those-
state's attorney involved in everything, so I don't
That's,
get
we
my,
got them involved. And, now Brent, you might feel comfortable signing a contract, not knowing the details. I just want to know the details is all.
now, all we have is,
That's all.
again, we
That's all.
operate differently. I've always had the state's attorney, I want my legal people behind me on anything I'm trying to get in the middle of that's going to start trouble or could be a bad situation, like Celeste getting upset, which probably couldn't have been preventable. You know, this man would have been in the room. We don't need a CP on the phone, we don't need all, this man is the legal counsel for this board, and he is not invited to all the meetings, that's BS, period.
If Ashley would have said something about inviting him,
Why would Ashley have to say something?
I'm
You
just
never said
saying,
that.
it was just an informative meeting. Celeste comes in all the time when she was here. I thought we had a good enough relationship, we can just talk. And that's all it was. It wasn't, it was just to find information is all. What was happening? What is her relationship? How's her relationship with this? I'm not gonna stand here and say that I know everything about the grant process. I've learned quite a bit through this whole thing about the grant process.
I sure don't.
But, based on when Celeste would always come in and just say, here, sign this, when she was an employee, it was never a problem. And, I know Celeste knows her stuff.
25 years.
I agree, she knows her stuff. But now that she's not an employee, I'm just curious as to why she was here. I did have someone else in the room. I have actually got in the room to verify everything that happened, and Ashley, I'm sure, will say the same thing. We explained it all in the meeting that we had with you, and so.
So the recommendation now, since this other thing came up, is just to hold off.
Well,
Okay, so.
I don't know if Tim feels
comfortable.
comfortable sharing what he heard.
You want,
I got a phone call at lunch, and they are going to withdraw their DCEO application for
Really?
grant. So that makes all this irrelevant. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter now.
now is that the 1 million or the 40?
No, right, and I thought we might, yes, for the grant that we're talking about here right
Well,
now.
The 1 million and I think you said a 13 point, so we're
No,
talking about the 1
It's
million.
just a $1 million grant.
Okay.
It's a $15 million project, but only $1 million grant.
Right,
What, I mean,
so I think they may have found, okay, I'm not gonna speculate on whether.
That's why I said if you don't know.
Let me just simply
That's
say
fine.
that the phone call I got was that they're going to withdraw their application for the DCEO grant.
And that's her
Okay.
decision.
Right.
Right.
And you don't have to,
I clarified that with him just a second ago, and, because I said originally I wanted to table this until next week so I could get full bit of information, and, we don't need to do that.
we don't need to go.
We don't need to table it.
Don't table, period, it's done.
Right, we can take it off the agenda. It's now a new point.
if I can ask a question,
Yes,
you don't have to give me a name, but did you hear that from an investor?
I did,
Okay,
from the lead investor.
that's okay. If you could get something, even if it's a text message or an email or anything, just something in writing saying that, just so that we can
Yeah.
put it in our files to close up, that'd be perfect.
Can I forward you a text message?
That'd be fine,
Will that be
yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, yeah. Congrats.
Now, gentlemen, I can't say this may come back up, I don't know.
We'll just take it off for now.
But as of right now, they've withdrawn, or they're going to withdraw their application for the grant.
Now, the documents that we looked at this morning, which is bullet points 1 through 39, did show where the money was going that they proposed. The grant money was going to go specifically toward equipment, not toward construction or, employee costs or anything like that. So, yeah.
Right.
Who knows? Not trying to speculate. Maybe they found, a better deal on some equipment or something like that. Who knows?
But once again, I think everybody on this board is in favor of this processing plant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We are incredibly grateful for these investors into our community and our county.
I've helped
Amen.
them.
And I think that with this many jobs and the potential for this many people being affected positively by this, this is something that we need to keep an eye on and do everything we can to help them.
Amen.
That's just my opinion.
Absolutely.
Once again, we should be working every day to build economic development in this county.
I've directed them to the enterprise zone process, and hopefully that's going through. So they can take advantage of that. Once again, to reiterate the problem that I was trying to resolve with Celeste was the internal control issue. Being that we contracted with, or the board stated that we go with Greater Egypt. The internal controls show that we did not say that we would go with any other private contractor. That wasn't something that I said, that was a board decision.
That's a question I have on Greater Egypt. So we give them allowance every year, we contribute to them. And then they're gonna charge us on top of this. So like this grant would have been written by Celeste, we would have been out nothing. If we'd had Greater Egypt do, we probably would have paid additional, I'm assuming,
But potentially, yeah.
$2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or whatever, on top of what we give. It's not included.
Sure.
Correct.
That's correct. Each grant would be separate, is my understanding. And potentially the administration fee, they could charge up to what the administration cost is, assuming we're not taking it out of grant funds and we're, the county's gonna eat
So if
that
she
money.
doing it, not cost us anything, it would make sense to,
Sure.
but it's a moot
Which
point.
brings
It's a
us
moot
to
point.
another point of discussion, okay? We know that Greater Egypt stated that they don't do housing grants either.
Right.
Celeste did both DCEO and housing grants, or CDBG grants and housing grants. The question here is, in an effort to maybe avoid future, do you want to consider passing, or I don't know, would be another resolution allowing us to contract with a private individual, or possibly hiring someone back on for the position, or just staying with Greater Egypt? Whatever it is, in order for, we have to, pass whatever direction we're going to go with, so that our internal controls jive with audit testing. And
My opinion is we shouldn't have our hands tied when it comes to grants.
Should I, with one person?
With one person.
I was
I
told-
absolutely agree.
why they wouldn't go with Greater Egypt, I don't know. They said they're very difficult to get a hold of. I do know that at one point in talking to them about the enterprise zone, I had to go to Kerry's office, and I went to his office and told Kerry, I'm like, this individual's trying to get a hold of it. Seems to be hard to get a hold of you. Can I give him a phone call right now while I'm in your office? And I did. We got him on the phone, got the procedure going through Greater Egypt to get the enterprise zone. That's the only way you're going to get the enterprise zone, is going through Greater Egypt. And then there's a whole process that you have to go through. They have to apply, and then the executive board meets, and then from that point on, then it goes to every taxing body to be put on their agenda to vote and pass. Once they're all passed, and that is all submitted to the state, and then the state has up to 90 days to approve it. So there's a process. It just doesn't happen overnight. It may take up to, 6 months by the time it's all said and done to get qualified for the enterprise zone. So I'm just saying, for some reason, they didn't like using Greater Egypt. Now, I'm not giving Greater Egypt reasons why, but I do know they were in the process of moving from this office to this office. Was something dropped along the way? I don't know. But that's the only thing I know why they wouldn't have. They've been so hard to get a hold of. I don't know anything else about it. Don't know.
Well, 2 cents worth. They do a great job. Okay, Greater Egypt's done a lot, and they're busy. I kind of took it that David Carey, that he really wasn't real big on taking all this on. Did we, Stephanie, fresh memory, did we, any kind of money agreement on that deal with them doing any grant writing?
Not yet,
They were just
I
talking
think it's
about?
just per grant,
per grant.
Okay, well,
and it's up to 15,000. per
okay, they
grant.
are limited, you said that, but there's a limit to what they can do, and to get the housing grants, that's not their expertise. Tim, I'm gonna go with you, I mean, I'm going to agree with you, said a while ago.
Yeah,
We should never lock ourselves into one person,
I don't
because,
like being handcuffed on anything.
and I don't wanna commit money to one person or the other. Let's keep our doors open to there's a lot of great grant writers out there, there might be a specialty.
I don't
let me
remember us
clarify
being, I don't remember us being exclusive to Greater Egypt.
Huh?
When we talked about this before, I don't remember us being exclusive to
Yeah,
Greater
that's the
Egypt.
direction the board.
I thought it was talk, but I don't think
I don't know that we made it exclusive though.
we decided contractor.
No, we didn't sign. a
We're
contract.
just talking.
So
There's-
You're right,
we're
guys.
talking with
Both
the
sides.
contract with
That's the
Greater
direction
We
that we're
talked
gonna
about
go.
it,
There is a contract with Greater Egypt.
Well, that's what we give them per year.
Right, so we have,
Okay.
Well, we got,
But as far as grant writers, as Celeste stated before, and verified, within Williamson County, there are only 3 grant writers. There's Carrie Minnis with Greater Egypt, there's Celeste Solers, and then there's a Tammy Campbell that works for Crawford. That's the only ones in Williamson County. You have to be qualified to be a grant administrator. Now, other than that, there are a whole host of grant administrators that can have qualifications throughout the state. Some, I know another one was in Murfreesboro. I think there may be some in either Franklin or Jefferson County. So there's a whole host of administrators that you can go with. But in Williamson County, there was only 3. So that would limit your choice. But hence, if we decide to go with somebody else, we have to lay the internal controls and approve those internal controls. Yes, now, beside Greater Egypt, we can go with one of these others.
I don't know if Celeste did or not, but I mean, we don't have to, like they said, get handcuffed to anybody. Can't we just be open to, if we need
Well,
the housing grant, can we not just, it's her IMRF situation, it's her situation. The people downstairs that come in and work, or for the sheriff's department, call IMRF, they get clearance to make whatever, 1,000 hours a year. It's just a matter of a phone call. If she chooses to do that, I'm all for keeping her expertise, whether it's 1 time, 2 times, or 20 times, to help this county keep going like we are. But that's just, and use the other folks too. I'm not saying,
And that'll be a board decision, because according to the standards set for procurement, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, that once we've been awarded the grant, then we would put it out for bid
on who's gonna be the grant administrator.
on who's going to be the grant administrator.
Right, in certain situations, there are some exceptions to that where you wouldn't have to go through the bidding process, but yes, generally, you have to go through the bidding process. In the past, you haven't had to do that because you had somebody in-house that was
Correct.
qualified to do
Correct.
that, but since you don't, yeah, you'd have to go through the
And
bidding
so then,
process.
once we get the bids in, following the standards that they've set, then the board would decide on who would be the grant administrator.
Sure, and to piggyback off of what Brent was saying just a moment ago, is let's say that you did decide that you wanted to reestablish this professional relationship with Celeste. There are multiple ways that you can do that, as you're aware, whether that's, making those phone calls and hiring her on part-time, to max at 1,000 hours a year. Or you could, if she, got her own FEIN, became an LLC or whatever she wants to do, you could essentially hire, like you'd hire a vendor, a subcontractor that you use, so often. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to go with anybody. If you wanted to expand it beyond Williamson County also, you could say that, look, the board will consider, people from Southern Illinois or something like that, So there are definitely ways to do it. I guess what I'm saying, long story short, whichever way the board wants to go, you have lots of options. You can be creative here and we can make it work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we just need to establish the procedure.
Sure,
So we
absolutely.
could shoot for that maybe next week, try to figure something out. And you got crosswalks, right, grants, I mean, there's a.
I will say this,
I still don't think that we were exclusive in that. I don't think that was the
I think it's a
intention.
conversation.
Yeah, did you remember being saying that they were gonna be exclusively handling our?
I don't, Pam, but that doesn't mean.
We didn't say.
It might have been
I
alluded
don't
that
think
way.
we used the word
Right,
exclusive.
but I mean, I don't have a problem doing a board action to open it up for whoever wants to do this, as long as they meet whatever qualifications we set.
I would like to hear.
Well, that would only be if they did.
If they do,
Job security, I'm gonna say.
I'm just saying.
In order to bid, you have to be
Right.
a grant administrator,
Right.
qualified grant administrator.
As long as, and I don't have a problem with that, just as long as they meet our qualifications.
You know,
Now-
just to draw job security, Andrew, I would like to hear some creative ways, seriously, how we could do it to where we can be able to pull somebody that's
If you do that,
expertise
you
in
spend
this
time.
or expertise in that, because quite frankly, Great Region's expertise is not, like Jim said, in housing, and stuff like that. And some creative way, you know, just some bullet points on how we can go about it, maybe next week, look at it and see.
Sure, absolutely. I can draft up, a bullet pointed list with, 4 or 5 different options. If you want to go this way, you can do option 1, option 2. And then that way you guys can, make an informed decision on how you want to try to approach it going forward. And as you're well aware, since we're considering modifying it now, if you pick option 4 or none of my options and go with something else, you can always change it.
And the one point that we clarified with Mr. Govan yesterday was that when it comes after we receive the bids and we're opening the bids and looking at the bids, we are not required to go with the lowest bid. We can always defer back to who has the most experience and or any other criteria that we might feel is more important than the lowest bid. So we're not held to using the lowest bid per se.
Sure, which,
Perfect examples on the jail. So
Yeah.
the lowest bid is not always the best.
right, absolutely. Lowest bid, not always the best. You guys have
The jail
the
people went out of
ability
business.
to,
You realize I made my living being the lowest bid.
Absolutely.
Fill that out.
as long as you can
So
justify
you're pretty easy
going with
on
higher
the
bid, you're fine.
No, we got a problem with the plumbing.
So we're going to just scratch it up for now. If it comes up again, Stephanie, put it back on there. That's where we stand. You're gonna get some, get some bullet points to kind of look at and see what direction we might go on that, to open it up. It might be open it up to, maybe Celeste doesn't want it, maybe Celeste don't want to do it, but it may be open up to Franklin County or, somebody, I don't know.
However, let's keep in mind now, and this is what Tom Couch was implying, that if whoever we receive a bid for the grant administrator, they have to have their own FEIN, am I correct on that, Andrew? And their own insurance. You need to check on that?
Well, yes and, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, if you're gonna start requiring that of everybody, then yes, you're gonna want that. But that being said, as Mr. Govan told us yesterday, if it's somebody that's not set up with, an FEIN, they just use Social Security now.
Okay.
So there are options there. The other
Okay.
thing, one other point is, one of the options, it's just an option that I will give you, is that you hire someone, make them an employee of the county. At that point, obviously, they wouldn't need their own stuff.
Correct.
There are some benefits, there's pros and cons to every way.
Then we become the second Celeste County employee.
Right. So,
When you said, if you're gonna make everybody do it, who is everybody?
well, one of the things Tom said, or Tim, I'm terrible with names, I apologize, but Mr.
Thomas
Couch.
Insurance guy.
Tom Couch.
Starts with a T, you got that
It
right.
does, right? Yeah. One of the things the insurance guy told us, right, is while we have this policy, it sounds like the department heads still have discretion as to when to use it and when not to use it, right? So if you found a grant writer or a grant administrator, right? Anybody can write the grant is what we found out, but you have to be qualified to administer the grant or deliver it is the new term that they're using. And so if you find somebody that's not is really qualified and meets the bid and does everything you want, but they don't have that, now you have to make the decision of, are you going to require it or not? I don't know, that may be something you want to do on a case-by-case basis. If it's not something you want to do on a case-by-case basis, make that part of the bidding requirements, right? And that way, if they don't have it, well, gee, they're the low bidder, but they're not bonded or licensed or insured or have their own workers' comp or whatever, which is specifically what we were talking about was workers' comp insurance. If they don't have those things, then, well, they don't meet the bid criteria and we can go up and select somebody else.
So basically, department heads just use their own discretion on how they want
At least what I got, I sat in that meeting, Brandon was there also. What I got out of the meeting was, look, we need to make sure that when you hire a vendor or somebody to do service, that you're doing this hold harmless, or you're making sure that they have workers' comp insurance. However, there may be certain circumstances where, depending on what the job function is that you're bringing them in to do, it may not require it, and essentially use your common sense and discretion.
And to further the point that Tom brought up was, who's going to have all these hold harmless agreements and stuff like that. And not to put burden on every department head to keep track of that, I suggested that we could either give them all to Stephanie, we could put them in a file, and Tom had even suggested that then we can forward them on to the insurance company and they could monitor it for us or take care of it for us. So I thought that'd be fine, I would think. And that way we're not burdened
Yeah, but
anymore.
enforcement land ought to be tied to their pay. So when they request pay, if they've not filled out the forms and given us the information we need, we pay them, we may never see them again.
Oh, you're talking about the independent.
I'm talking about independent contractors
Yeah.
for the insurance.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, so.
to. So, I may be off on this, but wasn't there a grant or something? Tim, this may be what this goes back to that meeting. And I'm wanting to say it was Johnson City. Let's work on a grant, and they took over at Greater Egypt.
Well, there were a
Wasn't that
couple
one of the
grants.
conversations?
I think there were a couple grants that Greater Egypt took over that were in the process, weren't there? Seemed like there were ones that had to be followed through.
Yeah, I think JC was one of them, and in this type of business, is it a bid or just a proposal? Because I think there's a difference.
It's a bid, from what I understand. In a bid, it would be, I guess, the fee that they would charge to be the grant administrator.
That's my understanding of it.
But are they matching apple to apples? I mean, I don't know nothing about this part.
So in other words,
Yeah, unfortunately, I have limited
Proposal to do
experience
this,
here.
and one person said proposal to do this, but they're lower because they didn't add this part in. Do you lay out the specs for them to?
Well, you'd have
Propose,
to have
bid, or-
bid specifications,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Which would be the overriding if you accept the proposal, it will have to be according to bid specs.
because I mean, this is
not
way over my head.
now, are you talking about for the project or just a contract with the
Whoever is
grant
going,
administrator?
yeah, the person going to do the grant.
That would be basically just saying, I would do this for X number of dollars. Tim would say he'd do it for a little bit lower,
But
You
Brent
would say
has,
for-
Brent has a point in that when we start the bidding process, we have to be comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
Well, that's part of it. You put the specifications out there,
Right.
what the grant
Right.
entails. And then say, I don't know what the specs are for publishing it. I know we have to publish somehow. Now, does that mean on our website? Does that mean a newspaper? I don't know. But we do have to put it out there for bid. And I would imagine that by putting it out for bid, you have to give the specifications of what you're asking for.
I'm not sure what I'm asking. I think I know what I'm asking, but I'm not sure exactly.
I tell you what, gentlemen, can we go back to this? We're kind of far afield on this.
Well,
To the airplane.
not a problem.
Well,
Yeah.
as long as we have a sense of direction where we're going.
Personally, I think that, just I'm speaking here, we either open it up or we look for somebody to, be a grant writer for the county. That would solve everything.
Can a person do grant writing in 1,000 hours a year? I mean, I don't know what it takes to,
I don't know.
Uh,
But I would imagine yes,
A lot of the grants,
especially if you're hiring them in a limited scope, right? You're part-time, here's what you're doing. I would think yes, you'd have to be careful not to give them extra duties, right, which would eat up some of those hours maybe. And the first year might be a trial. Maybe worth contacting other counties to see, hey, have you done this? Is it, is that something that's feasible? I don't know. I would agree, at least from a legal standpoint. I think it's simpler. It's just easier if you guys have somebody on staff
Probably.
who is your grant writer. And this is not, please, nobody take this as rude or insulting or anything. But back when we were dealing with the Celeste issue for retirement, I recommended to the board, probably out of place, I shouldn't, it was a personal opinion at the time, that you either try to retain her, offer her some sort of part-time, or go with somebody else.
We talked about
Yeah,
it.
you did.
And it's a board decision, so I'm not trying to step
You
out of
look
my
at the best
chair.
interest of the overall.
Sure.
package.
If you guys, and next week I will give you a list of options that will include hiring somebody will be one option, and going with, some sort of different independent contractor on a case-by-case basis. It's a total board decision, and we can make any of the options that I give you will be legal and will work. I'm just saying it would be much simpler, especially from a fee standpoint and a request for proposal standpoint, if you have somebody on staff.
So I think that's, like I said, we need to go for direction.
Well, what are your bullet points?
Okay.
You got something for us, huh? Homework?
Okay. If there's no other questions or concerns, then moving on to the American Rescue Plan Act funding application.
So in front of you, it's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go through this. I will do my very best to be brief. Basically, the first thing we want to say is, one, this is a draft. Two, there are going to be two parts to this, and you only have part one in front of you. It's a 7 or an 8-page document. Part one is the application. Part two would be a participation agreement. Anybody that you guys decide to fund would then be required to sign a participation agreement, a contract, if you will, with the county that says we're giving you this money for this project. Here are your rights, here are your responsibilities, here are our rights, responsibilities, and duties to you. And, all the covenants, you guys are agreeing to do this, and there will be a recapture clause in there, which essentially, if you're unfamiliar with the recapture clause, basically says if you do something wrong or misuse this money or do something that you didn't say you were doing in your application, we can come after you to get that money back.
Does that need to be in this first part? Because I read through it quickly and I don't think I
Sure.
recognize any kind of language like that.
I think there's some language in here that says that you agree that you'll sign a participation
Okay.
agreement. So,
Okay.
and the participation agreement is in the works. That's not something, since it's phase 2 and we're focused on getting the application. I didn't take the time
So
to do
it's
that.
actually on page 2, section 3, item number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on page 1, remember there was this issue that we had last week, and I was going to provide you guys 2 different ones. Well, instead of making copies, I'll just tell you what the difference here is. We talked about having just a rolling application. You put it out there, and then as applications come in, we'll consider them. That's option 1. Option 2 is a little more traditional, as Travis had told us, is you have a deadline kind of for phase 1, December 31st. And then starting on January 3rd, because the first and second is a weekend next year, you'd start considering applications that were turned in by December 31st. And then you'd have another round, assuming you had money left over. So on this very front page, on the cover page, right in the middle, kind of that second paragraph says applications will be accepted and considered for funding on a rolling basis until funds are exhausted. If you want to go that way, that language will be there. If you don't want to go that way, I'll just take that out. And then on page 2, where we have the timeline, we'll put the specific dates. And I think I did that so that you could just see how both would be. I think it's simple if we have all the applications turned into one primary source, which is why I put Stephanie's information on there for applications to be turned into. Going to page 2, At the top, the general information, it's just a general summary of what ARPA is and what the money is supposed to be used for, just very blanket, to address community needs. Feel free to read over that in your spare time, while you're sitting at home watching the ball game, and let me know if you want to add or change anything. Section 1, ARPA fund eligibility. From looking at different applications, there are people that provided paragraphs and paragraphs of what is eligible and what isn't. I put this link to this website on here. I think it's just easier to let people go if they're interested and see, here are the different things that you're eligible for. This information is widely available on the internet, and I don't think we need to waste 3 or 4 pages putting that all on this application.
Agreed.
Section 2 is the application timeline. And if we decide to go with this kind of phased approach or round approach, round 1, applications will be available, whatever, October 1st. Deadline is December 31st. January 3rd, we'll start considering them. Assuming money's left over, then what we can do is I can go in here and we can just change these dates. And then we can put the application out again, say next May for round 2 or whatever dates you guys want. And, May 1st application available, it has to be turned in by June 15th. And then we'll start considering round 2 based on the money that's left. Whichever way you guys want to do it is fine. That note down there would be there, assuming you guys want to use this round approach, which is we will keep track of the day you turn your application in, and we'll consider them in order because that's fair, but we're not going to consider anything until the application deadline closes. So again, that's where we had the contention last week. If you guys want something different, again, please let me know. I will finish up. I just have a few more notes and then we can circle back to it. On section 3, you want to?
Just one point.
Sure.
On your bullet point on part 2 there, January 3rd, 2022, applications review and county board approval begins. I mean, I haven't checked what date January 3rd is.
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday.
Yeah,
I was going to say, do you want to just put, first part of January and not put the 3rd?
First week of January.
Yeah.
Just kind of make it generic, that's first part of January, whatever. I don't care.
First
Instead of specifying the date.
Okay.
Because that almost makes it sound like we have a meeting set up for that day.
Sure. And I thought about that. I checked the dates because I thought, well, you don't want to do it the 1st, it's a holiday. What's the 2nd? Oh, it's a Sunday. Okay, we'll go 3rd. Section 3, application submission instructions, just some general instructions. Now, on number 3 under that, I have email completed application. I need to change that and put in that the application, I guess, can be, it says there can also be hand delivered. That's something that you guys need to decide how you want the applications to be turned in. I think we talked about last week putting this on the website, making it like a fillable PDF or something like that so that it'd be easy for submission. But if you guys decide that you want applications submitted only by hand or only electronically, so that we have a digital record of it, then we can modify that, is all I'm saying.
You think it's reasonable to say just electronic submissions?
In this day and age, I think so.
Because I was wondering about that, if we shouldn't just accept digital.
Yeah, I think for like community grants or small grants, like for example, Ashley sent us an email, I don't know if everybody got it, about like a checklist and some grants and stuff that Jackson County has, which is an entity I reached out when developing this application. Their small business grants are only electronic. You can't go pick up just a packet and
Right.
hand turn it in. In this day and age, I'd like to think that we could be fine with digital. The next page, which is page 3, just a couple of basic, general, frequently asked questions. This is something I think we'll develop over time, over the course of the next week or something. Again, as you're sitting at home watching the ball game and you see a commercial and you're like, hey, this is kind of a question I would have if I was applying, let me know, shoot me an email and I'll add it to this. At the bottom, put the onus, I guess, on Stephanie, just a point of contact for if somebody has a question, a specific question, they can call in and, Stephanie can shoot us all out an email or something and, I can give you an opinion and then the board can decide how it wants to respond to that. Then when we get to page 4, that's more of the information gathering. You have the business name, some of the questions on there, standard, about bankruptcy, about pending lawsuits, and whether they've received other COVID relief. While ARPA is separate, it's important to ask about whether they have received other, especially if it's an outside business. It doesn't have to be a business. We could have some nonprofits, charitable organizations, county government departments, whatever. But if it's specifically a business, we want to know if they've received other.
So many of them are going to have received PPP money.
A lot of them probably receive PPP money, I would guess. You know, especially from a business standpoint. Page 5 is really, and look, we put boxes in here. Again, if it's a fillable PDF, they can type it in, which would be nice. This is where the project summary. We want to know what your, project is doing. Specifically, A through L are pointed questions, which I copied and pasted most of from the Oshkosh application. That is a specific ARPA application. The goal here is to improve our community. And so we need to know what your project is, what safety controls you have, and how is it specifically going to benefit our community and address the community need that we have. This is the biggest thing that you guys will probably use when trying to make a determination. I put on there attached additional sheets if necessary. For example, I know Sheriff's Office, they've already submitted you guys a detailed letter. Just, see attached and attach the letter. So it should be relatively simple, for somebody like that. The next page, page 6, again, just proposal overview, some numbers. And then I think it's important that we know a little bit about what auditing controls they have. We have in here the question about what happens if they ask for $250,000 and we only give them $100,000. Is the project still viable? Do they still want the money? Do they want to withdraw the application? So on and so forth. And then obviously we want to know about their budget. Page 7 is something that came from not an ARPA specific related application, but some places when they're doing these grants, if a business is applying for a grant, they want to see that certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State's office. I don't know if you guys want to include this or not. It's obviously really easy for me to take out. Obviously, I understand if you guys get 10 applications, only 5 of them may be from businesses. I did put language in there that you'll see that obviously it doesn't apply to departments in the county government, or obviously a sole proprietorship wouldn't have it either. Let's say you're a nonprofit organization, food pantry or something like that, wants some money, it wouldn't apply. If you want me to leave it in, I will. If you want me to take it out, I will. If you want me to add language that says, if applicable,
Well, I was just getting ready to ask that. Drew, is, can we still consider it if somebody doesn't have a Secretary of State good standing?
Absolutely, and I think what you want to do is realize, okay, if this is a restaurant, or a business, and they say, hey, we don't have that, well, you're probably going to hold that against them more than, let's say it's a sole proprietorship or a nonprofit or a church or something like that. Obviously, they're not in business per se, they may not have that. You're not going to hold that against them. When you're going down your checklist and trying to decide whether to approve or fund or not fund. The last thing I have is the last page, which is basically their certification. I need to put in here a line that obviously they're agreeing to sign the participation agreement. We had it earlier, but it needs to be in this certification also. I will add that. If there's any other language that anybody feels needs to be added, or if you read this and you're like, hey, I don't think that's important, again, let me know. I know you guys just got this before the meeting today. When I sat on the board, I hated getting documents right before the meeting because you don't have time to review them. So again, while you're watching the ball game or taking the bubble bath tonight, just think about it and just shoot me an email. You guys can individually shoot me emails with what you think is good. And then the goal would be is I'll take your suggestions and changes and come back with another draft or a cleaner copy for you next week. If I don't get that many suggestions or changes, I'm also going to give this to Ashley as well and get his input. At a certain point, once the changes and stuff like that are made, I'll present you guys a copy to be approved.
I'll say this, we went through it quickly, but I know, of course, we're gonna read it in more detail, but
Sure.
you did a good job. I think what you've done here, just like we said last time, it's probably gonna eliminate some people that look at this and go, oh my God, their head's about to explode.
Yeah.
We're probably gonna eliminate ones that are serious.
The A through L questions, especially as you get on down in the list, they get a little bit tougher to answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
But we want people to apply for this.
Yeah. We want people
We
to
want
apply.
serious-
We want
serious-
serious people.
serious.
We want
people
serious
to apply for this.
applications for this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, low bidders. Yeah, low bidders got to eat too.
It's good. I mean, just going too
That's
fast.
good, Andrew. I just think this, like,
Thank you, I thought
it's
this
just
looked
gonna be
really
minor
good when we
changes.
first look at it.
I think, and I thank you for doing this. I think you did an excellent job as well.
Thank you. I know you guys are also waiting for me on a hiring policy. That with the stuff with the grant, with the, obviously that took a backseat for me this last week. But now it's something that will get a bigger chunk of my attention, and I'll have to you guys, obviously for next week, but I think we talked about that's something that you guys would maybe approve at a regular meeting in October.
Right.
But just want to give you an update. I haven't forgotten about that.
Yeah. Can we have that at 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 o'clock, October 1st.
How long has
One of
county
the-
been in existence? And
And
we're just
on
not getting it. You can have that done by the end of the day.
End of the day, that'd be great.
On that note, I showed Andrew because I wasn't aware, and we found on our website, I guess, I don't know when they put it on there because I never really paid any attention to it. There is a place for job postings on our website. So we can always have people, post there and direct people to our website instead of waiting to post in a paper, the cost of the paper or whatever.
We just recently put that on there.
Yeah, so we weren't aware, at the last meeting we were discussing this, we weren't aware that was on there.
So that comes to you.
I think it goes to Julie.
So one of the things that I've been in discussions with Jim, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a good opportunity where everybody can hear, that we're considering is, the goal here is not to limit or tie the hands of our department heads, right? Still allow them to hire who they want to, but we need some general guidelines. One of those guidelines would be that you post the job on the website. So whoever it is, whether it's Stephanie or Julie, if you need to have a job, you send it to them and they'll put it on the website. We do need an internal control, whether it's every week, every Friday or every 2 weeks or whatever they would recommend. We check in with the department heads. Hey, have you filled this position? Is it still open? Yes, it's still open. Leave it up. No, we filled the position. You can take it off the website. Something like that. You can still post the job. SIU, the law school, has a job board. If Brandon or Miss Thien are looking for an attorney, you can still post it in another place. You can post it wherever you want. It just has to be posted on the county website.
And that gives us an idea about who's hiring them.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was worried about when we first started talking about this, how we're going to control it. Not that we need to control what they're doing, but we need to know.
Right, absolutely. You guys should know, right?
Yeah.
You guys are the ones that
Because
are in
we
charge.
get the phone calls like, well, I didn't know that job was open.
Exactly.
Or they show up at the treasurer's office on the first day of work and nobody knows they're coming.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, the goal is just to provide some general guidelines that will allow everybody to know a little bit what's going on a little bit better and to protect the county ultimately is what this is for.
Shows how antique this place is here. What we used to do, so recently, people come in and ask them to apply for a job, they give it to us, then we make copies, and then we pass around that, that the people are hiring.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
There you
That's
go.
what happened. Now you find antique, but I don't care who they hire. It's not my business they hire, but they got to find a better way to get people to apply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
message out, that's all. That's all this.
Don't we make
We
copies
have
and
a
pass it
question
around?
from the floor.
So, I'll just use the highway department as an example. We post, like this last year, we posted for our temporary help this summer. We generally hire our permanent employees based on that pool of temporaries. Not always, but generally. So if we were gonna hire somebody in the permanent position, would we need to post that?
As long as in the job description for the temporary, it said that, this position may transition into a permanent position. As long as you put that somewhere in the job description, I think you're fine. And I also, let's say you need 5 people, I don't think you need to post 5, just one, just one job posting for temporary and
Yeah.
there you go. Now, if
So-
something happens in the middle of the year, you're short a person and you need to hire like a permanent person immediately, then yeah, we need a separate post for that, but otherwise I don't think so.
So if the temporaries, let's say they work for 1,000 hours and are gone for a month, and then I have a retirement, and we choose to hire a full-time position, can we go back to that list, back to those temporaries, hire out of it without posting?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Back years ago in Jim Webb's era, he actually, just my opinion, was the main thing, but you have some people that be there 6 or 8 years and never even get a chance at a full-time job. My view, again, the main thing, shouldn't lead them on if they're not gonna have a chance of being full-time. So what Jim said, well, a couple of years, if you don't know if they're good or bad, you need to cut them loose.
Yeah.
And then you hire out of that pool, and that's what he did. And I think that's probably what you're doing now. It's more, if you can't tell in 2 years they're any good.
Well, yeah, I tell you, right now, it's real hard to find temporaries. So you can pretty much take what you can get at this point.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think you're right to hire within temporaries. If you want to hire full-time, it's not hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal here is not to restrict who you can
Correct.
hire.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to restrict.
just want to clarify.
Your funds are totally different, brother.
Just keep it simple.
You got the big bucks.
Right.
And cover us, so.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, other than
I
that.
will give Rachel this to make a copy, so you don't have to worry about giving it to Ashley. I'll give this to her now.
Oh, I got a bunch. I got
Oh, you
some
got-
extras, because I thought everybody was gonna be here.
You were just here to answer questions, huh? And you got to see a floor show.
What more did you ask for?
And you didn't have to pay to enter.
I'll send Ashley an email and tell him that we gotta have you.
Oh.
Travis, do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I did have one question. Earlier when you guys were discussing the water bluff development,
Mhm.
you talked about, Tony, talking about burning diesel on October and possibly building a casino. The one caveat I got to that is there's gonna be a lot of deliveries coming in. And until they get Vermont improved, that could be problematic.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's what we need to discuss and have him here to discuss.
Now, on Meridian, remember he said he would post somebody at the front and the end of Meridian, people on this Hilltop Road.
Yes, you're right about Brady, I'm sorry, I misspoke, I meant Vermont. It could be-
Vermont is
It
the-
could
is
be
the
problematic for Vermont because, I mean, that was the whole decision, going ahead and overlaying that first, so they could withstand the constant loading of those deliveries coming in.
Right,
I want to try to hit on Travis. I'm going back to the beginning. I'm going to tell him what he said. The road would be built, but we're worried about our road coming in Vermont. Okay?
That's what I'm worried about.
He said, "My gosh, anybody come down there, big load, $500 fine." Question A, who's gonna write the fine? He says he is. Bull. He's not here. So they're gonna tear our roads up. He says, until that road's fixed and brought in from the other side, that's the way they're gonna come in, Brent. They're gonna come out on Reed Station Road. Exactly what he said, not on your road. I personally believe in destroying our roads, you need to put some kind of tonnage out there. If they come down there, tell them to go the other way. That was the agreement.
The solution is they overlay Vermont.
Sure.
To starting this.
Sure.
And then also do the Meridian Road, one lane traffic like we discussed with the flagman,
Sure.
to keep it, you can keep the trucks in the center of it. And that may still not be a solution, but it's what we're going to do.
I said, are you actually, you really think they're gonna go all the way around Vermont? Or, well, go away, he said, that's the way they're gonna have to do it. That's what he said. I got plenty of witnesses. Again.
Well, like I said, I told Tony, I said,
that's why you should
I
do
invited him to come to the meeting, he's not,
Empty.
you know.
He did invite me. It's empty.
So, but
I
anyway,
will say this for the record, many times during our conversations with the subcommittee, we asked for the budget. Many times we asked for the budget. And I think what you're also asking about was a feasibility study.
That's it, yeah.
And then we asked for the feasibility study and they sent us one that was redacted, to which we asked for one that wasn't redacted, which we never got. And then we got, and the feasibility study also said not to be used for financial loaning purposes. And we were told that that is the typical way that these feasibility studies come out. They're not recommended for.
We got one tentative budget thrown at us one day.
A conceptual budget,
And
which was immediately rejected.
I noticed, what, $1.7 million, that the story on that is not true, and we need to have a discussion with him, because I'm telling you,
Well, you know, I think all of us have found a lot of inconsistencies, I'll rephrase it.
that's a good word.
Inconsistencies in dealing with them. I think to the point that any dealings that we have with them now need to be in front of the full board and recorded. Everything. This is too big a project.
Sometimes.
This is too big a project, and this is too many inconsistencies.
That's been
So-
one point for the last month.
Anyway, if no one has anything else to say,
Need a motion to reconvene.
to recess and reconvene for tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and IDOT will give us that presentation once again. Travis, you want to say anything on that? You were in that last meeting. I know Brent may not be able to make it. It was only like about an hour long, I believe, at that.
I mean, it was very informative. They've got a couple of different options for the county to look at. They made it clear in the meeting that they were not currently set up to fund that project. And I think we made it clear that we weren't set up to fund that project either. It's an informative meeting. There'll be public announcements or public involvement coming up in the next few weeks where the public can make comments to that. That's part of the whole NEPA process. And then based on that, they'll make a decision on the preferred alignment and move forward. At that point, work with IDNR, Office of Water Resources, to come up with the final design. And then they'll start the land acquisition process. And then who builds it is up in the air.
And for clarification, this is the Heron Road extension
Yes.
from the roundabout there at
Blairsville.
Blairsville
Yes,
to Walker's Bluff from the east side.
that's correct.
From the east heading to the west.
And that they go through certain areas of wetlands, and I know Brent, this for Brent's purposes here, if he can't make it tomorrow, can you explain in detail maybe about why, what the issue is with wetlands and the
Okay,
use of
so,
wetlands?
so there's a whole NEPA process that you have to go through to publicly fund the development. And one of those processes is looking at wetland impacts. And so, and based on those wetland impacts, the Office of Water Resources, DNR, has a lot of say in that. And so, depending on how they classify this area, whether urban or rural, makes a big difference on the amount of elevation that you can change the water level. That's a huge consideration for this project. Another thing they look at on NEPA is biological, which is your crayfish, your bats, that kind of stuff. The other thing they look at is cultural. So they look at
Archaeological sites.
yeah, archaeological sites, that's the word I was looking for, archaeological type stuff. And so, you know, those are the kind of things that they try to avoid. If they can't avoid them, then it requires a dig, or it requires replacement of wetlands, or it requires, tree replacement, things on that order. And so that makes a big difference in the cost of the overall project. The biggest thing on this one is the Office of Water Resources. If they consider that an urban area, which I personally do not agree with, then the water elevation can only be raised a tenth of a foot, versus a rural can be raised as much as 6 inches. And that's gonna make $5 to $10 million difference in one in each of the options. So that's a huge deal.
Travis, wearing your IDOT hat, well, first of all, you know, we had these dates to choose from, and I got a problem with my dad, okay, so at 10 o'clock I gotta be at a cardiologist in the morning.
Sure.
But that's fine, I mean, because, I think this is probably something dollar-wise that's probably never gonna get off the ground anyway. But is it protocol or something that they have to go around and do these little sessions or meetings, just to cover themselves?
Well, as part of the whole meeting process, that involves having presentations with the general public, with local units of government. When I was a studies and plans engineer at IDOT, I was in charge of that stuff. And we would go around and meet with city councils, with local county governments, with city officials, and present this stuff, so that they're aware of what's going on. I know they've already met with Walker Bluff at one point and presented this, and they've met with the county board. It's a courtesy of the department to go and specifically talk to local governments. And then they'll have open meetings, which I think is going to be virtual, to discuss with the general public. And at that point, you as the board, as the general public, are welcome to put your comments in, just like the general public or anybody else that wants to come in.
If there's anything that you think is super duper important, just email me something from the meeting that's super duper important to me to remember. But I think dollar wise, it's going to be ridiculous if I'll never happen. But I instead of trying to change the date, we're trying to keep the budget. Just that meeting, that meeting got changed from 10:30 to 10, and before you know it, might be 9 tomorrow. I don't know what I'm getting into. So
Well,
whatever.
Brent, what I would encourage you to do, is to, I can let you know when the virtual public meeting is.
There you go.
today,
That's fine.
And you can watch that. You as a board will not be making any decision
Sure.
at this meeting. It is strictly informative. You'll get the same information from the county.
And I'll talk to Kerry too.
You can also listen to the recording of the meeting.
There you go. I'll do that.
It's either way. I mean, it's.
I'll do that. It comes on next day. Okay, I'll do that.
But if you got any questions, don't hesitate to call me, like, anytime you got questions.
I'm just kind of in a mess, so that's fine. Okay, very good, thanks.
I'll try not to badmouth you tomorrow.
I don't care. I'm used to it. Any faith, that's all easier.
I'm usually the one that takes the brunt of that.
You have no idea.
Carrie likes to say that I'm all your guys now. It used to be her problem, now I'm all your problem.
Yeah, she's funny.
Tim made the motion, I believe, I don't know if it was second, to recess and reconvene.
I made that motion apparently, so. Motion made.
About an hour ago.
Yeah, motion made.
I thought you did.
I did. Motion made.
He did.
Who seconded?
Second.
Jim Marlowe,
Yes.
Brent Gentry,
Okay.
Tim Atkinson.
Yeah.
Thank you for just.
And that is a